This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin Hoffman.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. Today is Wednesday, July the 31st, 2024. We're so glad you can join us. Coming up a little later on the program, we're going to get the latest HPAI or H5N1 update from Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig. But first, let's go ahead and run down those markets. It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net. We're at the end of another trading day on this final day of July, talking with Kenan Layden of agmarket.net. And Kenan, first of all, the grains, what did we see come out of those corn and soybean markets?
You know, the market today kind of acted like it did yesterday. Big sell-offs early, then some recovery throughout the day. Probably not as much recovery as we want, but, corn is down right now, and soybeans had, just a little bit off their opening prices of the day, a little bit higher.
Anything that really caused that movement today that we saw that stuck out?
In corn, good ethanol number today, a lot of corn used for ethanol. There was also some sales to unknowns, but the market didn't really seem to react to that information too much. That's positive information. I think that weather is weighing heavily on the markets here with, the Midwest looking good. In many areas, as far as precipitation and crop progress and crop conditions, I think that's weighing heavily on the market. So any of the information that we're getting that's positive just seems to not, move the market as much as we'd like to see up.
All right. And, looking at the livestock side of things, I know cattle had a somewhat decent day yesterday. Hogs, not so much. I mean, did we see more of that today, or was there some changing? And what did we see out of livestock?
Feeders were mixed. Live cattle were down, and the hogs kind of came back today, especially in those front months. So it's good to see hogs kind of continue to find some support here on some of the important technical areas on the chart, and hopefully they can continue to move higher. Cattle, we'll have to see here. Last time I read there was no cash trades today in those lives, but if cash remains strong, hopefully find some support. Cattle have been kind of floating sideways here, in a big range. So hopefully, with some of the positive fundamentals, cattle can continue to, consolidate and break higher and not lower here when we get to some of those important technical levels.
Now, it just seems with cattle, it's been, riding high for so long. It's like there's some caution, I don't know if it's just with people who are watching the markets or if the traders are watching that as well. Is this bubble going to burst anytime soon?
That is a great question. Is this bubble going to burst? One thing to think about is the market will eventually revert back to the mean, whether that's tomorrow or in a year. It will. The bubble will probably burst at some point, but we're hoping that they stay strong with some of those fundamentals. You hear a lot about the cattle herd and heifer retention and how there hasn't been a lot. So as long as cattle numbers stay low and, beef consumption stays high and those export numbers don't get too high, there should be some demand and cash stays strong. But we'll have to, those are some things to watch closely if you are a cattle producer. I don't think having some downside protection or some risk management strategy is a bad idea, with historically high prices in cattle.
All right. Well, Kenan, we thank you so much for the insight. If folks want to talk further with agmarket.net, look at what their situation is, find out what their best options are, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, you've heard it before, but check us out online at agmarket.net and find a broker in your area.
All right, Kenan, we thank you so much for the insight, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you.
That again was Kenan Layden of agmarket.net. Let's go ahead and take a look at the closing numbers on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network market screen. September corn down 6 at 382 3/4. Soybeans for August up 1 1/4 at 1028 1/2. Soybean meal up $2.10 at 354.10. Soy oil up 55 cents at 43.30. Chicago wheat up 3 1/4 at 527 1/4. Kansas wheat down 1 1/4 at 549 even. Minneapolis spring wheat down 3 cents at 581 1/2. Oats up 1/4 cent at 326 1/4. August live cattle 57 cents lower at 187.12. Feeders up 27 cents at 257.25. Lean hogs up $1.07 at 92.27. Pork cutouts unchanged at 103 even. And Class 3 milk down 18 cents at 20.53. That's been a check of our ag market recap. We're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soy Checkoff. When we come back, Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig gives us the latest in the high-path avian influenza situation. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome back to AMPM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Well, we haven't heard a lot about any new cases of HPAI or H5N1 that is making its way through poultry farms and dairy cattle herds here in the state and across the country. We talked with Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig to find out where things are at, what kind of precautions are being taken, and also what we can expect to see at any fairs and festivals this year. Now, moving on to those 4 letters we haven't liked to talk about for a while, and that's HPAI, and of course, what it's also doing with the dairy cattle, H5N1, depending on who you want to ask. But obviously, we know the situation. We haven't seen much as far as more outbreaks in dairy cattle now for a couple of weeks, and kind of give us an idea of where we're at right now.
Well, actually, when you said 4 letters, I was hoping you were going to say fair, but we can talk about that too. But high path, HPAI, and I'll knock on wood here. We haven't had a case now in the state of Iowa, a new case in about a month. And so again, just to rewind here, this is a continuation of that high path avian influenza situation that we've been experiencing since the spring of 22. It's been spring, fall, spring, fall. Spring of this year, something different happened. That high path spilled over into the dairy industry and started to move with cattle all across the country. And we in Iowa have had both poultry farms affected and dairy farms affected with the same virus, telling you that it's moving between farms. And so what we really did is aggressively go out and do the epidemiological work with the support of USDA. We've have ongoing research that's happening on farms to try to figure out how does this virus behave in a herd on a farm, and what's the milk, impact to that? How quickly do cattle recover? Those are things that lessons that, we think if we learn them, we can share with others. But this is all about trying to help create new biosecurity strategies for farmers. If we say, well, you need to increase your biosecurity, but you don't know what to do, then you could guess. But what we want to do is try to make that an informed decision. Here's what the epi tells us. Here's what the research shows. And then you can be very specific and targeted in your biosecurity planning after that. And so that's really what our focus has been. We sort of have the mentality that if we're going to be experiencing the positives here, we can just as well learn something that'll help us improve biosecurity in the long run. The other thing that I'm going to stress here in Iowa is because of our livestock sector, because we have so many species and we're so strong in so many categories, we can't just isolate this and treat it just as a dairy issue or just as a poultry issue. The two have an interplay. We have to think about this as an all agriculture, all livestock issue, which is why we're really trying to pull folks together, do the research, and understand what's happening. I wish that I could say that it's really quieting down across the country, but it's not. You continue to see cases in Minnesota and Colorado in particular, and we know that it remains a threat here in Iowa. So I hope that we can continue to get through the summer with no new cases, but we are planning and preparing as if we will.
Have there been any major lessons learned yet so far about how it's behaving with the dairy cattle?
I think that the one thing that has already been seen and true is that it definitely moved with lactating dairy cattle, meaning it moved between states. And so then that gets to where we're looking at, heading into fair season here. And we put in an order that requires that if you're going to show take a lactating dairy animal to the fair, to an exhibition or a fair, that you need to have that tested within 7 days of going to the fair, because that's been obvious, is that that's been a vector for moving this, is lactating dairy animals. And so if we can have those animals tested and they're healthy, they're clear, then we believe that you've got healthy animals showing up at a fair. They're going to tend to stay healthy at the fair, and they're going to be healthy going home. And that's really important, because what you don't want to have is mixing animals from different farms and then sending them back and potentially spreading it. So, that's why we put the testing protocol in place. You've got some county fairs that have decided to just cancel their shows altogether. We didn't recommend that, but we certainly support their decision to do that. State fair, there will be dairy cattle at the show. Again, if folks need to test before they go, and if they do, then we believe that we can safely have that show happen. I'm a huge supporter of FFA and 4-H, and I just didn't want to see a year without those young people having a chance to show and compete. And we think we can do it safely as long as there's a testing protocol.
And that again was Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig. And that's going to put the wraps on today's show. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. Don't forget about the free 3 times a day market podcast with analysis sent right again, free of charge to your mobile devices through Amazon, Apple, Google, Spotify, and Podbean. From the IARN studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Mark Magnuson, Andy Peterson, Quentin Slater, and Riley Smith, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.